So a lot of times there's stress that's happening with the baby that indicates that delivery needs to happen sooner rather than later. And if those signs are ignored, that can lead to injury to the baby.
If you've suffered a loss of life during childbirth, how do you find out if it's due to negligence? Well, that's what we're going to ask the lawyer today. Hi again, everybody. I'm Rob Rosenthal with AskTheLawyers.com, and my guest is attorney Michael Perez with the Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta. Michael, thank you for making some time to answer our questions today.
Sure thing. It's good to be with you, Rob.
So we are going to probably use the term wrongful death a lot in this interview. So let's start with a legal definition. What is wrongful death?
Well, wrongful death is just what it sounds like. It's any time someone has died as the result of a wrongful act or negligence. And whenever there's been a wrongful death, the survivors of the deceased person have the right to bring a legal claim to recover damages, including the full life or the full value of the life of the deceased. So whenever there has been a death as a result of some wrongful act or negligence, that's a wrongful death case.
So today we're talking specifically during childbirth. Maybe there's a loss of the child or the loss of the mother. Is it difficult to determine if malpractice has occurred? I would imagine, especially for someone who's a layman, it's difficult, but that's why they need someone like yourself, right?
Absolutely. As you can imagine, anytime there has been a death, it's a tragic situation. So a lot of what I do and attorneys like me at the Warshauer Law Group do for folks is to help provide some answers as to what happened and whether or not specifically anyone's negligence or wrongful acts contributed to a death. And so how we do that is we conduct our own investigation into the circumstances. We'll sit down and talk to the surviving family members and ask them details of what happened in a medical case like a death resulting from labor and delivery in the birth setting. We'll ask details about what happened at the hospital, what doctors said, what nurses said. So we conduct our own investigation by meeting with the family. We'll look at the medical records, which will document the things that happened at the healthcare facility, at the hospital during the labor and delivery process. And then ultimately, we will talk to medical experts who will look at those medical records and who will look at the facts that we determine through our investigation and determine whether or not there were any deviations from the standard of care, which is what we will need to bring about a wrongful death case that resulted from some form of medical malpractice.
Now, I would imagine there's any number of things that could go wrong that could end up in a death during childbirth. But what are some of the more common ones, Michael? What are some of the things you've seen in your experience?
Well, we do, and these really are tragic circumstances, and any death is a sad occasion, but particularly when you're looking at the birthing process, which, for a lot of families is a very exciting time. When it ends in tragedy, it can be awful, and we see it happen in various ways. The birthing process is a stressful process for the mom and for the baby. And when it is causing unusual stress and too much stress, there are signs of that that are demonstrated through things like fetal monitoring strips that should be monitored by nurses and providers. So a lot of times there's stress that's happening with the baby that indicates that delivery needs to happen sooner rather than later. And if those signs are ignored, that can lead to injury to the baby. In the same respect that the labor process can be stressful in the mom and cause damage to her. And if that's not duly being monitored, that can lead to injury or death for the mother. We see a lot of moms who have problems with hypertension, sometimes through their pregnancy, but also as they go on to deliver. And if that blood pressure is not being monitored and it goes too high, it can cause serious injury or death for the mom. With the child during the actual delivery, if there's complications of that, if there's too much pressure that's being used to deliver the child manually, if the child's being manipulated certain ways, that can cause serious injury or death as well.
Do you see a higher mortality rate among certain segments of the population than others, or is it spread all the way across? Does it sometimes happen more often in say, lower income groups?
Rob, you've really hit the nail on a very important issue in our country, and really in the state of Georgia as well. We see a high percentage of African American women who are suffering death through the labor process or having injuries to their children, and it's really unacceptable. And some of it is also related to folks who are on the lower income side of things, and we see disproportionately that. There's one very good example that is on the other end of the income scale. Serena Williams, one of the most famous tennis players that we know of, when she delivered her first child, almost died from a blood clot during the process, which is another complication that can happen. And she, despite being a very famous woman, receiving, I'm sure, the best of care, had to advocate for herself and say to her doctors, hey, look, I know something's wrong. And had she not advocated for herself, says herself, she could have very well died from this blood clot that she had. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, it seems that a lot of times African American women during the childbirth process don't have their complaints taken seriously. So again, we know in Georgia that a disproportionate amount of deaths by women during the delivery process are in the African American population. And my hope is certainly that will be alleviated. But for now, that's what we are seeing.
It would seem to me, something you said, Michael, triggered a thought that, people want to think their doctors are, of course, they want to think that they have the proper training, they have the proper skills. They don't want to think anything went wrong because of somebody that's involved. So it would seem like getting someone like yourself involved to be able to determine if there was a malpractice or somebody's negligence that caused the problem, that would be helpful. And even if it's just something may not seem right, it's to get someone like yourself to look at it from a distance.
Absolutely. I mean, look, most doctors do a fantastic job and provide the best medical care they can. And certainly, in most cases, folks, go through the childbirth and the delivery process and everything's fine. And that's what we always hope for. But there are situations where it doesn't turn out to be a happy moment, and there is a great tragedy. And I always recommend to anybody who's been through a serious injury as a result of a delivery or a death in the most tragic of situations through a delivery process to see a lawyer like myself and the lawyers at the Warshauer Law Group who can look into that, investigate the circumstances. And a lot of times we're able to say to folks, look, I know this doesn't help, but there wasn't any negligence here. What happened, even under the best of circumstances and the best of medical care, would not have been avoided. And then other times we say, there were acts here that contributed to this injury, that caused this injury or death, or acts that were not taken. So one of the things that we try to do for folks is to provide answers and to maybe give them some explanation for this terrible, tragic event that's happened. And
from what you've said so far, I'm thinking an investigation and expert witnesses and that sort of thing. That doesn't happen very cheaply. What if somebody's thinking, I can't afford this, all of this, Michael? What do you say to that?
Please don't let that be a hindrance from reaching out and talking to me or the folks at my office. First and foremost, it doesn't cost you anything to talk to us. We do free initial case evaluations to determine whether or not you have a viable claim that you could bring for a birth injury or for any kind of complication from labor and delivery. And if there is a case to proceed with and we pursue that on your behalf, you don't have to pay us out of your pocket like the defense lawyers get. We don't send you a bill every month. We work what's called on a contingent fee. So again, we only recover our attorney's fees if we recover something for you, and we'll take a percentage of that recovery. As you point out, investigations, the work that we do also incurs a lot of expenses as we order medical records, as we consult with medical experts. We pay those fees as they are incurred, and the only way we get those reimbursed is, again, if we recover something for you. So, in the worst case scenario where we're not able to recover any money for you, you don't owe us anything. But our hope is that in cases where there has been negligence that has caused an injury, that we are able to recover money, that compensation for the wrong that has been done, so that you can put that money to some good use out of a terrible, tragic situation.
Not an easy topic to talk about, Michael. Thank you for making some time and helping us out today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
That's going to do it for this episode of Ask the Lawyer. My guest has been attorney Michael Perez from the Warshauer Law Group in Atlanta. If you want the best information or you're ready to choose a lawyer that lawyers choose, make sure to go to askthelawyer.com. Also, please take a second to like, share, and subscribe by clicking the button below. Thanks for watching. I'm Rob Rosenthal with askthelawyer.com.